Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every Wednesday so you can be ready to win the battle for business. That's right. Hey, thanks for sharing some time. Thanks for being on board today. And as always, a big thank you to our good friends and sponsors at Corbett Public Relations, where they've been promoting and protecting businesses and brands for over 30 years. So listen, do yourself a favor. Visit Bill and his team at CorbettPR.com. That's CorbettPR.com. Welcome aboard, everybody. Now, it is my job as the host of the Profit Express to get the absolute best possible guests I can to help ready you to win that battle for business. And listen, if I do say so myself, I think I've kind of hit the trifecta of guests today. What do you mean? Well, you can see a book, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But today I have on Jason Feifer. He is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, which is one of the go-to sources for entrepreneurs since he was first published in 1977. It's one of my favorites. He's also co-host of a podcast called Help Wanted, and as you can see, author of the book Build for Tomorrow, an action plan for embracing change, adapting fast, and future-proofing your career. Now, there's a lot to talk about, and I know as you're listening, you're already formulating your own questions. Man, I wish I could talk to this Jason Feifer. You know, who knows entrepreneurs better, right? And I'll do my absolute best for you, I promise. But I do want to focus on the book because for the entrepreneurs listening, the sales pros listening, we all understand change and its impact on us personally and professionally. And myself as an entrepreneur, myself as a sales performance trainer and coach, I know full well the impact of change. Listen, every time somebody hires me, there's change involved. And one thing that we know, one thing that I know, and I always remind myself when it comes to change is three things for human beings. It's risky, it's disruptive, and it's expensive. So that's why as human beings, we really tend to avoid it as much as possible. But here's the reality of life. Change isn't going anywhere. It's a part of our daily lives. So again, to have Jason on his book, which again is a Profit Express must read, get this on your business bookshelf, Build for Tomorrow, because Jason does a great job of describing and talking about, he talked about his own relationship with change, but then also how we, you and I listening, can manage our own relationships with change. So I'm very excited to jump on board and introduce my guest again, Jason Feifer, author, editor-in-chief, Entrepreneur Magazine. Jason, how are you today?
Man, I am great after that introduction. That was so powerful. Thank you for having me.
Well, hey, listen, it's having guests like you is why people tune in and listen. Editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, one of my favorites going back a long time. And of course, this book, which I'm very excited to talk about. Now, let's set the stage with the book. You discuss, and I think it's a great way for people to internalize your message, the 4 phases of change. And it starts with panic, adaptation, new normal, and wouldn't go back. So describe that for us. Let's kind of set the stage with that.
Sure. This is what I recognized, that everybody doesn't matter what level of accomplishment you have, doesn't matter where your career has taken you. Everybody goes through change in these same 4 phases. First, panic. You have no idea what's going on. You feel like the whole world is dropping out from under you, and there's good reason for that. Let us not discount why we do this. So decades of psychological research have confirmed what's called loss aversion theory, which is to say that we have found that our brains are programmed to protect against loss more than to seek gain. We are more concerned with protecting what we already have than finding something new. And if we understand this is how we are as humans, then we can give ourselves some grace when something is changing in our business, it's changing in our industry. And the first thing that we do is we extrapolate. We start to say, oh my gosh, this change equates to loss. And that means that I'm going to lose this comfortable and familiar thing. And that means that I'm going to lose this other thing. And that means that I'm going to lose this other thing. The whole thing starts to feel like a spiral downward. And that is panic.
Right.
Then we get to adaptation, where we say, all right, well, what do I have to work with here? What are the new things that are available to me? We get to new normal, where we start to build a new foundation, some new comforts and familiarities. And finally, we get to wouldn't go back, that moment where we say, I have something so new and valuable that I wouldn't want to go back to a time before I had it. That is available to all of us. You will get there. All you have to do to start is believe that it's available to you so that you can start moving towards it.
As Jason, as I was reading the book, now obviously, you know, we all still know and remember COVID and talk about, you know, the change, and you talked about it in your book. And myself as a consultant, you know, up into, you know, 2019, very little of my business was on Zoom. Most of my business was metropolitan New York. Then COVID happens. And Zoom now is how I probably conduct 80% of my business. And again, as I was reading this book, I was just kind of reliving my experience with changing COVID. I now have more clients outside of New York than I have in New York. And it was actually because of COVID and change.
Wouldn't go back. There it is. And I'll tell you something that you probably went through. You may not have thought about it this way, but I find it to be the starting point for understanding that relationship that we have with change. I like how you phrase that. That's how I discuss this. I feel like to fully navigate change and to help an organization do it, you have to first understand your own personal relationship with change. And that starts by recognizing what your true core transferable value is. I'll give you an example. Let's start with sales, because that's who we're talking to here. So during COVID, in the earlier days of COVID, I had a large pharmaceutical company reach out to me, one of the giants, and they told me that they'd love for me to do a virtual session. Right, we're all at home, to do a virtual session with a sales team from one of their departments. And the reason for that was because this sales team had always thought of itself as an in-person sales team. Like the individual sales folks were identifying themselves. Their core identity was, I sell in person. I meet people. I develop these relationships. I'm really great in person. Now that's not available to them. And this big pharma company was realizing they have a problem, which is that they're asking their sales reps now to use things like Zoom, and these people are saying, but that's just not who I am. I'm not a virtual salesperson. I'm an in-person salesperson.
Yep.
They wanted my help to get these people to shift. And so I walked them through this exercise, and it goes on. It's a longer exercise in the book, but I'll just cut to the chase, which is that what I want you to do, if you're listening to this right now, you should do this, is come up with a mission statement for yourself personally. And that mission statement should be a single sentence. The first word is I. And then after that, every word should be carefully selected because it is not anchored to something that's easily changeable. So I'm an in-person sales, salesperson who sells, XYZ thing. That's not a good mission statement. Too much of that is easily changeable. You could lose your job. Your job could just change its functions. COVID could come along, and the way in which you do your job could be different. Right. The thing that you're selling could be different. All that's easily changeable. Mine, for a very long time, was I'm a magazine editor. I've spent my career in magazines. But that is too easily changeable. All it takes is one boss calling me up and saying, you know what, you're out. Now I'm not a magazine editor anymore. Terrible, terrible way to tie our identity to something that is too easily changeable, because it will change. And then when it does change, that is no longer just a feeling of change to our work. It is a change to our identity that's scary, that's panic. So what isn't changeable? Now, for me, the answer is this. Instead of I'm a magazine editor, it is I tell stories in my own voice, because stories are things that I can do in a magazine, but also can do here on this great podcast, also can do when I'm talking to a pharmaceutical company sales rep. That is how I communicate. I tell stories. And then in my own voice is me setting the terms for how I want to operate in this phase of my career. When I went and I talked to those sales folks at the pharmaceutical company, we came to things like, not I'm an in-person salesperson, but instead I help others make great decisions. I bring valuable solutions to people who need them. Now, once you identify yourself that way, you see it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if it's in person or it's virtual, because it's still fulfilling your core mission. Once you understand your mission, once you understand the thing about you that does not change in times of change, you realize that every new thing, every change in your business is actually just a new opportunity to do the thing that you do best.
Wow. I love that. You know what? Because like you said, the verbiage is key there. And it's not just, I'm a pharmaceutical rep, I'm a face-to-face pharmaceutical rep, but you're saying it's really, it's your identity and the way you described it, with yourself as I'm not just a magazine editor, it's, I'm telling stories. Mm-hmm. It's a transferable brand, if you will, or message that you have for yourself based on your identity that's not limited to a magazine or face-to-face sales. Am I getting that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, it's the problem here is that people tie their identities too closely to the role that they occupy or the tasks that they perform. So that's how you think about yourself. That was the problem with the pharmaceutical rep, the pharmaceutical sales folks, which was that they were tying their identity to the tasks that they perform, and those tasks are changeable. So you need to tie your identity to something that is not changeable. That's why I use that phrase, the thing that does not change in times of change. That is your transferable value, and I guarantee you have it.
I love it. That's phenomenal right there. Wow. Talk about sharing nuggets. Thank you, Jason. So, all right. So now we can all appreciate technology ushers in change. It's the very nature of technology. And you talked a lot about it in the book. I found it was very interesting. And I'll just use 3, going back to the radio, the television, and our smartphones. Yeah. And how you talked about it historically, how we all thought it's this new evil, it's encompassing, it's going to take over our lives, it's going to ruin, how we communicate. And take us through how there's these almost identical parallels to how we've seen change of technology dating back to the radio, which is the 1800s, to the smartphone of today.
Yeah. So it's funny. My book came out just before the AI boom and generative AI. And so it's not addressed in the book because when I wrote it, that was not something that people were talking about. And it wasn't something that any of us were engaging with. But I bet that as you talk about new technology right now, everyone who's listening to us is thinking about AI and how AI is going to impact their work. So let me answer your question, but I'm going to drive towards that. And I'm going to help you see AI in a different way. So what you're talking about is this story that I tell really in some ways on repeat throughout my book, Build for Tomorrow, because it's about change, which is how a lot of the conversations that we have now about technological change are new versions of old conversations that we had about things that today we think of as commonplace. So people talk about the smartphone or social media as being quote unquote addictive. And that is exactly what they said about radio, for example. People genuinely were concerned when radio was new that radio was too addictive, that people would in an unhealthy way be sitting in front of their radio for far too long. There was literally, this is a real thing, radio face was a thing that people were concerned about, which was something that they specifically talked about with women, which was that women would be sitting in front of the radio and concentrating on what they were hearing for so long that their faces would harden into a kind of grimace. A real thing people were worried about, right? And that you just find that stuff about every new technology, obviously things like the car and the bicycle, but you also find it even in the teddy bear in 1907 when the teddy bear was a brand new thing, right? You don't think about that as technology, but it's at least an innovation of some kind. There was a national moral crisis over teddy bears. Priests were preaching against teddy bears. The schools were banning teddy bears. The concern was that the teddy bear was going to replace the doll, and the doll was what helped girls become mothers. And, back in the turn of the century, girls only served one purpose, of course, which was to become mothers. And so they were worried that this new innovation was going to short circuit this, this time-tested fate, of young girls. And so anyway, all of that is to say that every conversation that we have about how something new is going to harm something that we are familiar with is old and has been disproven, because we live in a world full of this technology that our previous generations fear. Now, let's talk about AI for a second, because this fits in really well.
Yeah.
I was at a conference for it was a mid-sized law firm in the Western United States, and they had me come out to speak to their attorney retreat. I do a lot of corporate speaking. And so I give this talk about change, and afterwards, all of these lawyers raise their hands during this Q&A session, and they all ask me about ChatGPT. It's all they want to talk about is ChatGPT. And afterwards, I got off the stage and I said to their CEO, I went to their CEO, I said, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that all the lawyers are focused on ChatGPT. And he said, I'll tell you what they're really worried about, that they're not going to say out loud. What they're really worried about is that they work on billable hours. Mm-hmm. And AI could make motion writing more efficient. Oh. And if my lawyer's work becomes more efficient, they're not able to bill as many hours. And that's what they're worried about. And I said, that's fantastic, right? And I don't mean that in an anti-lawyer way. That's fantastic. And here's why. Because find me somebody who likes billable hours as a way of paying for an incredibly expensive professional legal service. Who likes that? Nobody. Everyone hates that. It's a terrible, terrible system. It's a system that is broken, but we've kept it because what happens when something breaks in our home? We throw it away. What happens when something breaks in our lives or our work? We tend to keep it because it's familiar. So there was never an incentive for somebody else, some law firm, to say, people don't like billable hours. We're going to come up with a new solution. There's no reason to have done that because billable hours was the system, even though it was broken. But now AI is going to come along and it is going to break it. And that means that law firms are now going to have to come up with a better way of billing. They're going to break something that is already broken and come up with a solution for now. And we will be better as a result. And I guarantee you that once you have the framework of, are we breaking something that is already broken, you will find that the answer is most certainly yes. When AI comes to you in whatever sales process you have, and however AI is going to replace some function that maybe you had to do manually, maybe you're scared of that because you're thinking, this is going to replace the thing that I did before. Ask yourself, this goes back to all this past technology. Ask yourself, am I protecting something that is perfect? Does this work perfectly? The answer is probably no. Mm-hmm, so now the next question is, why am I protecting an imperfect system at the expense of building something better? Once you think about it that way, you say, let's start breaking things that are already broken. We can come up with better solutions. And if you know your transferable value, which we were just talking about a second ago, you are not afraid because you know that whatever comes next is still going to need that core thing that you have.
Wow. Okay. So speaking on behalf of business owners everywhere, if you can limit the number of billable hours we have to pay attorneys, we're all for it. Nobody likes that.
Nobody likes that. But and just to keep in mind, and I know you're being mindful of the time that we have together, and so we can go a couple minutes late because I just want to make this point, which is that's not bad for the law firm either. Because when I talked to the CEO of the law firm and I told him this idea, he said that's exactly why we just hired a head of AI. Because the thing is, for the law firm, fine, maybe their work as they know it does become more efficient. And maybe they do bill less for that kind of work. Did they fire all their lawyers? No, because their work just became more accessible to more people. Right now, only a small fraction of people who need legal services can afford it. But if your work becomes more accessible, you can actually reach more people. It expands your business, doesn't contract.
Thank you. Yeah, you brought up a great point, Jason. If what you are doing, if your process is not perfect, which basically no processes are,
nobody is.
Then we have to be open as business owners to change. And to your very valid and valuable point, this creates a way to grow the market to people who couldn't afford $500, $750 an hour attorneys. So that's
and then you know what you reach? Wouldn't go back. Then you reach wouldn't go back because it's a better system.
Right. Yeah, I thought I would. How could I remember having conversations with my brother. How could I possibly do sales training on a Zoom, on a screen like this? I like to work the room. I'm in front of the audience, right? I'm on the stage, blah, blah, blah. As I said earlier, my business has grown significantly, and I have clients all over the country that I never would have had prior to the change of COVID. So there you go. There you go.
Right.
There's so much.
No, go.
So, there's so much to talk about in this book, but man, I want to talk to you about the bubonic plague story on an employment contract, but we won't go there. But I was geeking out on history for a moment. But
I can say it. I can say it quick. Should I say it quick?
Well, no. Let me go here because I think this one. Okay. I'm just teasing the listener because there's so many great stories. That's why. Jason's book, Build for Tomorrow, is a must-read on the business bookshelf.
Thank you.
One thing that you said is Chapter 7, the title of Chapter 7, Change Before You Must, a customary tale of Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Just touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So change before you must, the bubonic plague thing. Yeah. So you have to go find that in the book. But the teaser to that is that the bubonic plague created the economy that you live in right now. And so the great question about it is, was that a good or a bad thing? And I would say it's the wrong question. The thing is that we spend far too much time debating whether or not something should happen when it has already happened. What we need to do is put our energy towards figuring out what to do next. That's the payoff of that story. But you can go read it in the book. So change before you must. What I lay out is these two options when you're faced with change, which is, do you change when you're forced to? When something has reached you and it has undercut the way in which you have always operated, and now you are scrambling to try to come up with a solution? Or do you see something coming a mile away, and do you change before you are forced to? When you change before you're forced to, people may think you're crazy. They might not understand why you're doing it. Right. But you are giving yourself the time to do it right, to do it on your own terms. Most organizations do not do that. Blockbuster is a great example, right? Blockbuster, the story of Blockbuster is they didn't see it coming and they just got slammed by Netflix. But the point that I make in the book is they did see it coming. They did. They're not dummies. The people who ran Blockbuster were not idiots. They saw it coming and they couldn't do anything about it. Because do you know why big companies stop innovating? This was a question that was asked in a headline of a Harvard Business Review piece. And the question is, well, why do big companies stop innovating? And the answer that was offered, I love, and it answers something that went wrong at Blockbuster, which is that a small company starts with an innovation that gives it a toehold in a marketplace, and that innovation helps it grow. And then over time, that company starts to move more and more, and eventually all of its energy and resources away from innovation and towards efficiency, doing the same thing that it's always done, but just faster, better, and cheaper. And there's nothing wrong with efficiency. We like efficiency. The problem is that when everybody in your organization is incentivized to be efficient, to just do the same exact thing that you're already doing, but just a little faster, better, and cheaper, nobody is looking at how the competition is changing. And I think that Blockbuster is a great example of an organization that was built top to bottom to do the thing that it was already doing incredibly efficiently. The leadership of Blockbuster understood they needed to change, and it was not possible to move the company fast enough. And as a result, it collapsed. And the lesson that we have to take from that is that we need to build into our models, into the way that we operate, the understanding, not the belief, not the guess, the understanding that change will happen. And it is inevitable. And therefore, we need to start to anticipate it and start to build into our organization and into our leadership and into our processes that this is part of what we do, is we anticipate and we look for and we react to change.
Wow. Okay, that could be a mic drop kind of moment on the show, but that was awesome as far as efficiency over innovation. I got one last quick question before I let you go.
Sure.
I have to ask. As editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur, which I've been a longtime fan, favorite interview?
So there are a lot of different ways to go with this question, right?
Of course.
I love talking with everyday entrepreneurs, people who run Main Street businesses, because the challenges that they face are so interesting, and they are in do or die mode all the time. And those are really inspiring. But then I also get to talk to Ryan Reynolds and The Rock, and and those are really fun too. So I will tell you, as a way to answer that question, I will tell you a couple things, whatever just comes to mind as I'm answering this right now, just lines, just pieces of wisdom that I gained from very influential people. So, I name checked Ryan Reynolds and The Rock, so we'll do that. So Ryan Reynolds gave me this great line. We were talking about the change that he has made in his own career, going from actor to entrepreneur. He started a very successful advertising agency called Maximum Effort. He took stakes in a whole bunch of different companies, Mint Mobile, Aviation Gin, and has been extremely successful. He didn't know how to do any of this stuff. He had to learn. And he told me, to be good at something, you need to be willing to be bad. To be good at something, you need to be willing to be bad. And I think that's an incredibly powerful way to think. Oftentimes when we are faced with something new, and maybe we're not good at it, which is natural, we think to ourselves, well, it's not for me. Not for me. Otherwise, I'd be good at it. But what Ryan is saying is, no. When you try something new, and look, if we're talking to sales leaders here, and you are having to operate in a different way, you're doing something that you hadn't done before, you're in a different market, you might think, I'm not good at this. This is no good. Or just like those pharmaceutical sales reps. But here's the thing. What Ryan is saying is that what divides people between successful and unsuccessful is not whether or not they are good at the start of something, but rather whether they are willing to tolerate being bad long enough to get to good. And when you think about it like that, it changes the way that you should think about and approach trying something new and struggling with it. And by the way, if in case anybody hears chatter in the background, my kids are at home and there's like a whole thing happening outside of my office right now. So sorry.
And I've taken you over. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'll tell you. Last thing I'll tell you The Rock. So I had a wonderful conversation with The Rock, really wonderful conversation. And the thing that stays with me the most about The Rock actually happened after the interview. So really loved the time with him. Dwayne, very thoughtful, very, very smart, very strategic guy. I included in this book, Build for Tomorrow, that we've been talking about, I included a single paragraph about The Rock and his business partner, Danny Garcia. Just a single thing that I had learned from our conversation.
Right.
And then when the book came out, I sent him a copy of the book, just as a thank you. And I didn't expect to hear back. right? I didn't even know
Sure.
what address I had sent it to. I got it from his publicist. Certainly, I'm sure it wasn't his home address. Sent it somewhere. And months later, I wake up one morning and I check Instagram and I have a DM from The Rock. And I open it up and it is a 51-second voice memo. And I hit play on this thing. And what I hear is, The Rock's great voice. And he says, "Yo, Jason, this is DJ here." He socially goes by DJ. He's like, "Hey, it's DJ here. I don't know when you sent this to me, but I'm here in my office and I'm looking at your book. And I just got to say, man, congratulations. What a real accomplishment." And then he just goes on. He goes on praising me, reflecting on the conversation that we had. It's something that we were talking about back then. He says, so much has changed. I can't wait to update you on it. And, really looking forward to chopping it up, which is a phrase he used, like chopping it up another time.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's the thing. That guy did not need to do that. That guy's got a million obligations. I'm sure the whole world is waiting on things from him, right? There's so many projects and so many things. And he took time. He took 51 seconds to send me that voice memo, and it meant the world. I felt so special listening to that. I want to tell everybody about what a great guy he is. Yeah. 51 seconds. The thing is, it doesn't matter how important you are. It doesn't matter how busy you are. Spend a little time connecting with other people and showing them that they matter to you, and that will scale infinitely. And that's what I learned from him.
Two great stories. Thank you so much. Thank you for hanging on. Today's guest, Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief, Entrepreneur Magazine, author of Build for Tomorrow, a great must-have addition to your business bookshelf. Jason, all I can say is thanks. Thanks for sharing the book and the message of this book. It's powerful for entrepreneurs everywhere. Thanks so much for being on board today.
Oh, hey, thank you. I'll note you can get that book in audio. I read it myself. So, Amazon or Audible, Spotify, whatever, ebook or hardcover. So whatever form you like, it is available to you. And thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you. Awesome time. Thank you so much. And this is the Profit Express. Remember to tune in, be on the alert every Wednesday for great shows like the one I just had with Jason Feifer, author of Build for Tomorrow, editor-in-chief at Entrepreneur Magazine, and the powerful message that he shares and all guests here on the Profit Express share, the kinds of messages you need to be ready to win the battle for business. Until next time, it's the Profit Express.